Let's start with the LA Rams and the team that you cover very well. And some news came out, which you would think they'll be a little quiet before the final preseason game, but there's some back and forth with Ernest Jones potentially wanting to trade or not wanting to trade. Maybe the agent does. Maybe Ernest Jones doesn't know. Who knows what's going on with that one? But I'll give you a little bit of a two-parter. How critical is it to keep Ernest Jones on that roster? And then the whole with the Alaric Jackson getting suspended in a couple games of left tackle. How do you feel about the Rams knowing this information now?
Yeah, this is one of the more buttoned up teams, and now you got a couple of things that have really come out to light. So, first of all, I'll start with Lark Jackson because that's a 2 game suspension because that affects everybody else on the 53-man roster. Somebody else may now have an opportunity to make this roster. Just because if you're going to be without Alaric Jackson for first 2 games, does that mean that the Rams have to keep extra tackles or an extra guard, extra swing player along that offensive line? So that's going to be one in which Sean McVay, they have to figure out how they're going to handle this. But that's 2 games without your starting left tackle as well. How do you get through it? That'd be very interesting. So I think this is something that you don't see this happen too often. A Rams player being suspended for, for conduct, and you've got 2 players suspended, not just Alaric Jackson. You still got to talk about the Jimmy Garoppolo who's suspended for the first 2 games. So that's 2 Rams that are suspended. It's crazy to think because this we never have to talk about this in LA Ram country, but this is the big topic of conversation. On the other side with Ernest Jones, this is an interesting one because here you have a guy who's entering the final year of his contract, who's been your starting linebacker since he was drafted midway through his 2021 season. He's going into the final year, but the Rams truly haven't really paid a defensive player outside of a guy on the defensive line in Aaron Donald, but also Jalen Ramsey. Everybody else, they've kind of priced themselves out and had to go other places. Am I right? I mean, I think of John Johnson, drafted there, but when it was time for free agency, he had to go to the market. Same thing with Jordan Fuller, had to go to the market. A guy who was a starter from his rookie season. You just look up and down that defensive front. I mean, even I could throw in Samson Ebelcan. Free agency came, had to go somewhere else. This falls in line with who the Rams are. They draft, they develop, and then they let you go. So if I'm Ernest Jones, yeah, I feel like I've proved that I've earned a contract. But let's be honest, the Rams just aren't going to pay what Roquan Smith got with the Baltimore Ravens or Patrick Queen got with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's not who the Rams are. They value more offense than they do defense. And then there's another thing is seeing Omar Speights not play in that third preseason game because they felt that he made the team or made a big impact. That was the big thing that came out of the third preseason game as well. For a guy who was undrafted to be pulled or not even play, that to me is a telling sign that the Rams are maybe comfortable with letting and trading away Ernest Jones.
That's some knowledge right there, Fernando, on the linebacker situation. Because I'm starting to wonder if Ernest Jones or his agent, at least, I don't want to say it's Ernest Jones, totally
Correct.
doing this, but like you start thinking like he probably thinks like, well, they're lacking a lot of depth at the position. I have some leverage here. They need me. It's a young defense. They don't have Aaron Donald. I am not Roquan Smith, but let me give it a
Right.
shot here. And maybe the contract negotiations are lingering and lingering. And then to your point, Kirk, like yeah, like last year this team tore the roster apart because they're okay with letting people walk. Unless you're Aaron Donald or Cooper Kupp, Offensive
Yep.
Player of the Year, or Matthew Stafford, you better make sure that you have a real contract, situation where you're going to push them and bend their arms a little bit to make you get that contract. Fernando, I don't know what you want to say about that, but I thought Kirk nailed it there on the situation. Also with the emerging player with Omar. Who got the nod to Spades not to make the 40
Yeah.
or actually 48-man roster too, the 53-man roster too.
I'll say this too, because the last linebacker I believe um, that the Rams paid, who was a homegrown. When I say homegrown, is a player who they developed. That was a former first round pick in Alec Ogletree. And remember with
Mm.
Ogletree, he was a first round pick. So sometimes I always feel like the first round picks get the benefit of the doubt because you want to prove everybody right. Like, hey, we got the right one. We picked this one. So Ogletree was really got paid, but he didn't finish his contract with the Rams and was traded away.
To the
During his
Giants.
to the Giants. You remember that? So I think that the one thing I can say about Les Snead, he learns on the fly. He realizes that what, I can adjust, and the Rams just have not invested in a linebacker at all. I mean,
Well,
even
Corey
the Bobby
Littleton was a
Wagner.
good homegrown player that they did really well, and they're like,
Forgot
"All right,
about.
bye." And he goes to the Raiders, signs a 3-year, $36 million deal.
I forgot about that one. That's a great pull, that though, because Corey Littleton was like a on the ball like defensive end in college. Never even played off
Yeah,
the ball linebacker. They developed him into a starting middle linebacker. Plays well for the Rams, and then parlayed that into a big deal because the Rams weren't going to pay the linebacker position. It's one of those situations. If you're Ernest Jones, you're like, look, I want to be here, but I don't want to go into this year without the security. But then you realize the Rams, that's just not a position that they tend to pay.